The crowd roared like a living beast, surging with raw energy as the lights overhead cast long shadows across the ring. The arena was packed, every seat filled with fans who had traveled from all corners of the world for a fight they never thought possible. A fight that, just months ago, had been nothing more than a fantasy, a dream whispered in online forums and barroom debates. But now, that dream stood in the center of the ring, wearing black trunks and a stare that could freeze time itself. Mike Tyson, Iron Mike, the most feared heavyweight in boxing history, was back. And across from him, pacing like a caged predator, stood Roman Dolidzean, the relentless Georgian warrior whose knockout power had made him a nightmare in the octagon. Boxing versus MMA. Experience versus ferocity. And no one knew how it would end. Tyson's presence alone was enough to send shivers down the spines of even the most hardened fight fans. He had walked this path before, ruled the heavyweight division, and shattered men with punches that seemed to come from another realm. But this was different. He wasn't facing a fellow boxer bound by the same rules, the same rhythm of the sweet science. No, Dolidzean was an animal of a different breed, a savage force who had spent years battering opponents in the unforgiving world of mixed martial arts. He had no fear of damage, no hesitation in trading blows. And now, he was stepping into Tyson's world, yet he looked like he belonged there. The tension was unbearable, the kind that sent chills up the spine of anyone watching. The build-up to this fight had been relentless. Pundits dissected every angle, every possibility. Would Tyson's legendary speed and power be too much for Dolidzean to handle? Would Dolidze's iron chin and relentless pressure wear down the former champion? It was the ultimate clash of styles. The kind of matchup that had fight fans arguing for years who wins in a battle between a world-class boxer and an elite MMA fighter when the only weapons allowed are fists. Dolidzean had trained like a man possessed, sharpening his hands with some of the best strikers in the game. He knew stepping into the ring with Tyson wasn't just about surviving, it was about proving something. MMA fighters had heard it for years. Your striking isn't on the level of a true boxer. But Roman was determined to rewrite that narrative. He had knocked out men who were bigger, faster, and more technically skilled. He had felt the pressure of the bright lights before. Yet, as he locked eyes with Tyson across the ring, he knew this was different. The man in front of him wasn't just another opponent. He was a legend, a force of nature. And if he wasn't careful, that force could end his night in the blink of an eye. Seconds stretched into eternity as the referee gave final instructions. The crowd quieted, the anticipation so thick it felt like the air itself was trembling. Tyson's body was coiled, his muscles relaxed but ready to explode like a spring wound too tight. He had spent months preparing for this, sharpening his weapons, revisiting the old instincts that once made him the most feared man in combat sports. But he wasn't here just to prove he still had it. No, this was deeper. This was about legacy, about showing the world that power, true, unrelenting power, never fades. Dolidzean shifted his weight, eyes locked onto the man across from him. He had been hit before. He had been rocked, dropped, tested in ways few men ever were. But he had always risen, always fought back. Still, deep in his gut, he knew this was a different test. Tyson wasn't just another striker. He wasn't just another man. He was the storm. And now, it was time to see if Roman could withstand it. The bell rang. Tyson shot forward, his head movement crisp, his steps calculated. Dolidzean braced himself, knowing the first exchange would tell him everything. He had watched the old tapes, studied Tyson's early fights, and knew one thing above all else: the first moments were the most dangerous. If Tyson found his range early, it could be over before it even started. But Roman wasn't here to be a victim. He planted his feet, his hands up, his mind sharp. He had an answer for whatever came next. Or so he thought. Because as Tyson took his first step, there was something in his eyes, a glimmer, a hunger, something ancient and terrifying. And in that instant, Dolidze realized one truth that all of Tyson's opponents had learned the hard way. This wasn't just another fight. This was survival. The moment Tyson launched forward, the air itself seemed to compress around the ring. His feet barely touched the canvas before he twisted his torso, sending a jab screaming toward Dolidze's face. The speed was shocking, impossibly fast for a man his age, but the power behind it was unmistakable. Dolidze barely slipped the punch, feeling the wind of it graze his cheekbone. He fired back instinctively, a stiff right hand aimed at Tyson's chest, but it never landed. Tyson had already moved, his body weaving with that signature rhythm, coiled and ready to strike again. The crowd erupted as Tyson closed the distance, ripping a hook to the body. The sound of leather meeting flesh cracked through the arena like a gunshot. Dolidze staggered for half a step, eyes widening in realization this wasn't just power. It was something different, something old school. This was the kind of force that hollowed out men's souls. He gritted his teeth, forced himself to stay composed. He had taken hard shots before, but this was a different kind of violence. Tyson's eyes were locked on him, reading every movement, waiting for hesitation. But Dolidze didn't hesitate. He leaned into a clinch, wrapping his arms around Tyson's shoulders, trying to smother him. He had spent years breaking men in the clinch, punishing them with short, brutal strikes. But before he could even attempt one, Tyson exploded. A sudden, violent shift of weight. A twist of his torso, Dolidze was thrown off balance, forced back by a shove that nearly sent him into the ropes. He had trained for this, but training didn't prepare you for Tyson's sheer physicality. Then came the moment no one expected. Tyson stopped moving. Just for a split second, his hands dropped slightly, his head tilted. It was almost imperceptible, a flicker of something strange in his expression. Dolidze saw it: hesitation. Not fear, not fatigue, but something else. Something deeper. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. Tyson reset, his hands back up, his stance firm. But the damage had been done. Dolidze had seen it, and now he had a target. He stepped in aggressively, throwing a looping left hook, half feint, half attack. Tyson moved to counter, but this time Roman was ready. He threw his weight into Tyson's chest, forcing a clinch again. Only now, he wasn't just holding, he was testing. Feeling the way Tyson moved, the way he resisted. And there it was again. The hesitation. A brief stiffness in his shoulder, a slight wince as he disengaged. Something was wrong with Tyson. The crowd couldn't see it. The commentators hadn't picked up on it yet, but Dolidze knew. He could feel it in the way Tyson carried himself. There was an old injury, a weakness hidden beneath the power, and now that he had found it, he wasn't going to let it go. Tyson swung again, a thunderous right hand aimed at the ribs, but Dolidze stepped back just enough, letting the punch glance off his side. He needed time to test his theory, needed to draw out that weakness and expose it. But the risk was enormous. If he miscalculated, if he got caught clean just once, everything would be over in an instant. Tyson didn't give him time to think. He pressed forward, throwing a jab, then a hook fast, brutal combinations that forced Dolidze to stay moving. But now, he was looking for something more than just survival. He was looking for confirmation, watching the way Tyson reacted, where his balance shifted. And then, in the middle of an exchange, he saw it again. The briefest moment of stiffness in Tyson's left shoulder as he pulled back from a punch. Dolidze smiled. just slightly. Tyson saw it, and that's when everything changed. Tyson didn't like what he saw. The grin on Dolidz's face was small, but it spoke volumes. It wasn't arrogance or overconfidence, it was understanding. Recognition. That was dangerous. In a fight like this, knowing was half the battle, and now Dolidze knew something Tyson had been trying to keep hidden. The veteran boxer rolled his shoulders, bouncing slightly on his feet, as if trying to shake off whatever had betrayed him. But it was too late. Dolidze feinted, testing the reaction again. Tyson moved, but there it was, that slight hesitation, that flicker of resistance in his left shoulder. Roman's mind raced. Was it fatigue? An old injury flaring up? Or had the years finally caught up with the legend? He didn't have time to ponder. He had to act. He launched a heavy jab, but it wasn't meant to land. It was bait. Tyson instinctively slipped to his right, moving just as he always had, but Dolidze was already a step ahead. He pivoted and fired a brutal right hook, not to the head, but to the body, right at the spot where he suspected the weakness lay. Tyson grunted as the shot landed, his entire body jerking from the impact. It was a reaction unlike any other he had given in this fight. This wasn't the usual Tyson, the man who could absorb punishment and walk through it like a tank. This was different. The crowd might not have noticed, but Roman did. That shot hurt him. For the first time in the fight, Tyson took a step back. Dolidze surged forward, throwing another heavy hook to the ribs, then a straight to the shoulder. Tyson blocked the second punch, but his movement wasn't the same. The relentless pressure that had defined him, the forward march that had broken so many before, had slowed. Roman smelled blood. But Tyson wasn't done. Just as Dolidze pressed in for another combination, Tyson exploded. He twisted his entire body into a right hand, putting every ounce of his power into the punch. It came out of nowhere, sharp, devastating, perfectly placed. Dolidze barely saw it in time. He tried to slip, but the punch clipped his jaw, sending shockwaves through his body. His legs buckled. The crowd roared as he staggered back, barely keeping his balance. Tyson, despite the pain, rushed forward, launching another vicious hook that sent Dolidze crashing into the ropes. His vision blurred. The referee hovered nearby, ready to intervene. Dolidze sucked in a breath, shaking his head to clear the haze. He had been hurt before. He had been dropped before. But he wasn't out. Not yet. Tyson pressed in, looking for the kill. But Dolidze wasn't the same fighter he had been at the start of the round. He wasn't just reacting anymore. He was calculating. He absorbed a glancing blow, used the momentum to pivot off the ropes, and, just as Tyson stepped in again, he struck. A brutal uppercut, precise, sharp, and backed by every ounce of strength left in his body, snapped Tyson's head back. For the first time in the fight, it was Tyson's legs that wobbled. The arena collectively gasped. No one had expected this. Dolidze didn't hesitate. He swarmed Tyson, hammering shots to the body, forcing him to cover up. The legend tried to counter, but his movements weren't as crisp. That hesitation was now a crack, and Roman widened it with every punch. Then, in one final decisive moment, he dug a left hook into Tyson's side, right where the pain had first shown itself. The punch landed flush, and Tyson exhaled sharply, his body folding slightly from the impact. His arms dropped just enough. Dolidze fired one last right hand. Tyson went down. The crowd erupted as the former champion hit the canvas, breathing heavily, staring at the ceiling lights above. The referee rushed in, beginning the count. Tyson took a deep breath, trying to push himself up, but his body wasn't responding the way it used to. He rolled to his knees, blinking hard, willing himself to rise. 6-7. He planted one foot down. 8. He pushed up almost there. 9. But as he rose, his body swayed, and just as the referee reached 10, he dropped back to his knee. The fight was over. Dolidzean stumbled backward, his chest heaving, his arms raised in exhausted triumph. He had done the unthinkable. He had stopped Mike Tyson. Not with luck, not with a single wild punch, but with strategy, resilience, and a deep understanding of the man standing across from him. Tyson sat back on his heels, looking up at Dolidzean, then at the roaring crowd. A slow smile spread across his face. He nodded. Respect. Dolidzean extended a hand, and Tyson took it, rising to his feet. The battle was over, but in that moment, it wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about the war they had waged, the test they had put each other through. The audience stood in unison, applauding both warriors.